Help me reach 7,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps make the content better. She set her fork down and looked at me like she was bracing for a dentist. We were halfway through roast chicken at our small maple table, and I was talking about a supplier who finally stopped dodging my emails. She'd been nodding, asking questions, doing the normal spouse thing. Then she blinked twice, checked her phone face down by the water glass, and said, "How much did that new tire cost again?" 200, I told her. Why? No reason. Her shoulders lifted. Just you were following the story. You even asked about the delivery window. I was listening, she said, eyes flat. I'm just tired. Okay, I'll keep it short. I tried to smile. Big win, though. Good for you. She stood to rinse her plate before I'd set mine down. The water roared like a curtain. If I'd known where that tone was headed, I would have finished the chicken and saved the speech. But in that moment, I decided to ignore the scratch on the glass and tell myself it was nothing. She was Erin, my wife of 6 years, quiet wit, sharp eyes, a woman who used to show up to my softball games with a folding chair and a grin. I built a life with her in a little place outside Columbus, with a blue door she said looked optimistic. Back then the house felt warm. Lately it was tidy and efficient, like a hotel that forgot why you checked in. I rinsed my plate, dried my hands, and leaned on the counter. Saturday, movie or the farmer's market? I'm with Melissa in the morning, she said. Spa thing. All day. Likely. All right. Sunday. I waited. Erin lifted her phone, thumb moving like a metronome. Let me circle back, she said. That's our phrase now. She didn't look up. Don't be weird. I let it hang. She went to the bedroom early. I stayed in the kitchen and read emails I didn't care about, then put the leftovers away and clicked lights off one by one like closing a store. The next morning, she kissed the air near my cheek on her way out. You good for the utilities this month? She asked, keys in hand. Yes. Perfect. Thank you. Door shut. I stared at the blue door and heard in my head how she said perfect, like I was a contractor finishing a job on time. At work, Tyler and I were wrenching a stripped bolt out of a compressor. Tyler is the kind of guy who makes everything a joke until it isn't. He watched me pry knuckles into metal and said, "You look like someone swapped your coffee for decaf." I slept fine, I told him. That's not what I said. I wiped my hands. Erin's different. Not mad. Not sad. Empty. He whistled through his teeth. You two still doing date nights? We used to. Do them. And if she says no, do you? He nodded toward the clock. Life's shorter than a good warranty. I laughed because it was easier. But the advice stuck. By the end of that week, the little tells multiplied. Her phone never left her palm. She took calls on the porch with the wind loud in the microphone. If I walked into a room, she'd pivot her screen just enough to make it awkward. She started sleeping in an oversized tee and saying she was out of bandwidth for anything. She was gone late twice without a clear reason. When I asked how the spa thing went, she said, fine, and changed the subject to the credit card bill. I said a line quietly. I moved our joint card to a lower limit and set alerts for anything over 100. I didn't make a speech. I just did it because it felt adult. Erin noticed the next day. Why is the card blocked for gas? She asked, standing in the doorway, one sneaker on, one off. It's not blocked. You just hit the limit with groceries. Groceries? She laughed once. You think I'm buying lobster? I think we're spending without a plan. So here's the plan. I'll handle bills and fuel out of my account for now. Use your own card for extras, and we'll settle anything urgent. She stared. Since when do we split things like roommates? Since we started acting like them. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then shrugged. Whatever. I'll figure it out. She bent for the other sneaker and left without another word. That night, she came home early with takeout from a place I like. She set it on the counter without flourish. You ate? She asked. Not yet. I got your favorite. That's thoughtful, I said, watching her out of the corner of my eye. I was thinking. She tapped the carton with a fingernail. I overreacted this morning. I get that you're trying to be responsible. Appreciate it. Let's watch something, she said. You pick. It looked like a thaw. I wanted it to be one. We sat on the couch, 2 plates between us. A comedy played, and we both laughed twice in the wrong places. When she leaned into me for 5 minutes, my chest loosened like a stuck window. Then her phone buzzed. She slid away without looking at me and started typing. The rest of the movie, I watched her face glow blue. Long shift, she said after, standing. I'm going to bed. Okay. I answered, and the word felt small. Next morning, I put a second line in. I created a simple spreadsheet with 3 columns: house, car, discretionary, and dropped it into our shared folder. I printed it and left it on the fridge with a pen. No lecture. A form, not a feeling. Adult rules for an adult home. When I got back that evening, the paper was in the junk drawer under rubber bands. On the counter sat a package, new shoes, plus a small bag from a boutique that doesn't sell anything under 50. She was in the bedroom on a video call, voice tiny and bright like a commercial. I stood in the hall long enough to hear her say, "I know, right? He's been so intense about budgets lately. Like, chill." I stepped into the doorway. She looked at me without pausing. "I'll call you later," she told the screen and ended the call. "What?" "We're returning the shoes," I said, steady. "They were on sale." "Then it'll be a painless return." "That's controlling." She crossed her arms. "No," I told her. "It's responsible, and it's how I'm operating from now on. We go back to planning, or we go to separate ledgers. Your choice." She rolled her eyes hard enough to strain something. "I don't need a lecture." "Good," I said, lifting the box. "Because I'm not giving one." She stepped aside like I was a delivery driver moving furniture. For the first time it hit me. The woman I married would have argued or hugged me, but she wouldn't have stood there like a stranger waiting for her turn to talk. 2 nights later, I came home with flowers, and she didn't look up from her laptop. "Those for someone?" she asked. "Us." "That's sweet," she said, not moving. "Put them in water." I put them in water. I put everything in water. Nothing took root. I tried a last swing, the way Tyler had said. On a Wednesday, I left work early, let the guys handle the last order. I drove home, cleaned the kitchen, lit a candle because that was a thing in the early years, and cooked the meal we used to make together, the exact one where we'd bump hips and argue about garlic. I set the table like a magazine photo. The house looked like the version of us from 4 years ago. When Erin walked in, she stopped. Her eyes moved from the plates to the bottle to the candle, then to me in a shirt I didn't wear to work because I didn't want grease on it. "What's this?" she asked. "Just dinner," I said. "You and me. No phones." She set her purse down. "I'm exhausted." "I know. From the second I woke up. Meetings. Melissa needed help. My head is a mess." "I figured," I answered, staying light. "That's why I did the cooking." She looked again, softer for a second. "You did all this?" "Yeah." "Okay." She exhaled. "Okay." We ate. At first, it felt almost normal. She asked about Tyler's kid. I told her about a shipment stuck in transit. She laughed when I did the voice of my boss and said he'd ruin any party he walked into. She asked for more chicken. I got it. When I stood to take plates, I put a hand on her shoulder the way I always did, just palm to warm fabric, easy and familiar. She stiffened under my fingers and slid away like I'd placed a hot pan on her. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't touch me." Her eyes were on the table. I'm not in the mood to play the role of a wife. I didn't speak for a count of 3. The house hummed. I put the plate down. I didn't shout. I didn't ask for clarity we both already had. "Understood," I said. She stood, pushed her chair in with 2 fingers, and walked down the hall. The bedroom door clicked. I sat back and finished my meal alone, not because I was hungry, but because it felt like the most honest possible thing, a man eating at his table, accepting that the show was over. I stacked plates, ran the water, and cleaned the pan. Then I opened the laptop at the counter and pulled up a form I had hoped not to see for another 30 years. The next morning, I took the documents where they needed to go before work. At lunch, I called the bank and separated what I could separate. I moved my direct deposit. I shut down the joint card entirely. No speech. No threats. A system change. At 4, I texted my friend Nate, 2 years older than me, father of twins, a guy who never asks a question he doesn't want a real answer to. "Got a spare room for a week?" "We'll make space," he wrote back. "You okay?" "I'm clear," I sent. After my shift, I drove home, parked in the alley, and carried my bags through the side door. I didn't take everything. I took what was mine. Work gear, 2 suits, a duffel of casual clothes, my tools, a box with personal papers, my grandfather's pocket knife from a drawer. On the fridge, I left a note the size of a postcard. "You won't have to play that role anymore." I set my key on the counter next to it. On the way out, I paused at the blue door, not sentimental, just taking an inventory of what was mine to carry. At Nate's place, his wife Julia put a clean towel on the bed and a glass of water on the nightstand. "Eat," she ordered, pointing at the pot on the stove. "You look like you walked out of a wind tunnel." "I'm okay," I told her. Nate leaned on the doorframe. "You get to be not okay for a night," he said. "Then you can go back to being the guy who organizes shelves by width." "Tomorrow I'll organize your garage," I replied. He smirked. "I mean it." He did a mock salute. "I'll get labels." The first text from Aaron came 23 hours after I left. Not "Hey, where are you?" Not "What happened?" Not "Let's talk." "Why can't I use the card?" There it was. The hierarchy laid plain. "Because I'm not going to play the role of an obedient ATM anymore," I wrote back. She answered fast. "That's dramatic. You left me without warning and without money. You're a grown woman with a job and your own account," I replied. "You have options. You don't have me. Where are you? We should talk. I'm not meeting to negotiate respect. The paperwork is already in motion." So that's it. Because I didn't hug you after a long day? Because you made it clear the marriage is a costume you put on when you feel like it, and I'm not a prop. You're punishing me. No, I'm ending something that's finished. There was a gap of 30 minutes. Then, "I'm sorry if I sounded harsh last night. I was tired. You ambushed me with a dinner like we're in a movie." I read it twice. If I'd wanted to fight, there were a dozen lines to pull. Instead, I sent one message. "I hope you find what you're looking for." The next days weren't quiet, exactly. She wrote every morning and around lunchtime, like she set reminders. The tone rotated. One day practical. "Where did you move the car title?" Another day nostalgic. "Remember our first camping trip?" Another day transactional. "Can you transfer rent?" I kept replies minimal and factual. Papers were filed. Accounts were separated. The house was in my name. We discussed it 100 times when we bought it because I'd had the down payment and she'd been fine with it then. 3 days in, she tried another angle. She dropped by my job. Tyler came into the shop with eyebrows high. "You've got a visitor," he said, lowering his voice. "She looks like business." Aaron stood by the customer desk in a clean coat, hair pinned, holding a paper cup that smelled like vanilla. She looked like someone I used to know well and like someone I'd pass in a lobby. "Hey," she said softly, extending the cup. "Brought you a coffee." I took it because refusing would start a scene I didn't want. She scanned the room, the men, the tools. "Can we talk somewhere private?" "No," I told her, calm. "What do you need?" Tyler aimed his attention elsewhere, but he stayed within earshot like a guard who knew not to hover. "I overreacted that night," Aaron said. "I shouldn't have said what I said." "You didn't overreact," I replied. "You told the truth. I heard it." She shifted her weight, disappointed that the cup hadn't changed the math. "We can fix this," she said. "We can't," I told her. "We could have, before your respect left the building." "That's unfair." "What you call unfair I call accurate." I set the cup on the counter untouched. "Do you need anything specific?" She exhaled the way people do when they think you're being dense. "I need access," she said. "To our finances. To normal. I need you to stop making this complicated. You need my money without the part where you treat me like a husband." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Tyler slipped a receipt toward a customer like he wanted me to know I wasn't alone. Aaron tracked the movement and adjusted her voice brighter, the way some people do when they sense an audience. "This is embarrassing," she said. "It is," I answered. "I'm sorry it's happening here. But I don't meet at night. I don't text at midnight. If we talk, it's daytime and public. That's the new rule. So you're setting rules now." "I'm setting rules for myself. You can decide what to do with that." She stared for a long second, then glanced at the coffee I didn't touch. "Fine," she said. "I'll talk to a lawyer. Do what you think is best." She left with the same posture she arrived with, straight back, efficient steps. Tyler whistled again in that low key. "You handled that like a traffic cop," he said. Held up a hand. "No shouting." "I don't yell," I told him. I reroute. That night, Aaron texted twice, one short and sharp, one longer. "First, you're cruel. Then, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to get through to you. You're making it transactional. You made it transactional when you called marriage a role," I sent. "I'm just matching the truth." 2 days later, she tried a second soft turn. She came by Nate's place with a bag of groceries and a pie I used to request on my birthday. Julia called me from the kitchen, voice neutral. "Aaron's here." I walked in. Erin lifted the pie. Thought you could use something sweet, she said. We're good on food, I told her. It's not food. It's effort. Effort would have been accepting a hug at our table. Nate stood by the sink running water nobody needed. He's not a reactor, but he knows when to occupy a square foot as a witness. Erin lowered her voice. I miss you. You miss what I do, I said. There's a difference. Can we eat this together? She tapped the pie tin. Just talk. I'll listen. You can even make me sign your budget thing. Julia looked at me, then at the pie. I caught the flicker in Erin's eyes, like a fisherman's line tightening when the bait is taken. No, I answered. There isn't a version where we sit and pretend to reset. Not now. She blinked hard, once. The pie went on the counter. You're cold, she said. I'm clear. When the divorce papers reached her, the tone snapped. The text came in a rush. You did this fast. This is cruel. I gave you years. You're abandoning me. You're ruining my life. There were names thrown like stones, then silence, then a new batch of messages that read like someone trying on empathy in a fitting room. I didn't respond to the ones that wanted to fight. I responded to the logistics. She called often. I didn't pick up. She sent voice messages I didn't play. She waited at my work twice more. I had Tyler tell her I was off-site. She sent paragraphs to my parents and to Nate, trying to recruit. My mother wrote back a single line Erin sent me a screenshot of by mistake. We love you both, but he needs peace. Nate didn't reply at all. At the end of that month, she texted again. Can we meet to exchange keys? We can do that, I wrote. Saturday noon. At the Blue Door. She arrived on time in clothes that looked pressed. I stood on the front step with my hands in my jacket. The house looked the same. I didn't. She held up her key ring. This is sad, she said. It is, I told her. Sad isn't a reason to keep something broken. We could try counseling, she offered. Late in the game, but I recognized the pattern. When the cost shows up, offer a plan you refused when it was cheap. We could have earlier, I said. Now we're trading keys. She lifted her hand. I watched the key slide off the ring into my palm. I set my spare on her open hand in return, not because she needed it, but because accuracy matters. I didn't do anything, she said. The old defensive line, the one people use when the damage isn't visible like a dent, but like a leak that rotted the foundation. You did very specific things, I answered. The worst is that you stopped caring and kept cashing. That's offensive. It's descriptive. She looked past me at the door, like maybe it would remind me of good times. I can't believe you're throwing it away over one sentence. One bad night. It's never one sentence, I said. It's all the sentences before and after that add up. She studied my face like there was a test answer there. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't, I told her. You just stopped respecting me. I'm the one who would have been hurt if I stayed. Her mouth flattened. I hope you feel good about yourself. I feel clean, I said. That'll do. She turned, walked to her car, and paused like she might pivot, might run at the door with a dramatic speech. Nothing happened. She left. Civil paperwork takes longer than any human argument. I kept my head down. I made a list every morning. Work, gym, call the insurance, pick up a tool rack for Nate's garage like I promised. Simple things, finished in order. Tyler and I got the shop through a busy week. At night, I slept at Nate's for a while, then moved back into my place once it felt like a home again and not a scene of something that failed. I changed the locks legally when it was time. I painted the blue door the same color because it was mine. Erin's messages slowed. They never stopped. The second to last one read, I hate you for making me start over. The last one read, I'm sorry. I stared at both and felt the same thing. Confirmation I did the right thing. The day the final envelope arrived, I was leveling a shelf in my living room, a drill in my hand, dust on the floor. I opened the envelope with a utility blade and read the words that make endings official. I didn't frame them. I folded them back into the manila and filed them with the title and the insurance and the other papers that say you're a grown man who knows what he owns. Nate came by with a 6-pack, left 4, and said, one for tonight, one for the garage. You decide the order. We stood in the doorway, two men who've seen each other at good and bad. He doesn't speechify. He grinned at the paint. Blue still works. It's optimistic, I told him deadpan. He snorted. We put up the last shelf in silence like prayer. A week later, I was at the shop when a new rep came in from a vendor we barely used. Leah, calm, smart eyes, a way of speaking that sounded like she'd thought about her words before she said them. I wasn't hunting. I wasn't even looking. We talked about parts and lead times. She asked a clean question about an order. I answered without trying to impress anyone. As she left, she said, "You run a tight ship for a guy who says he just fixes things." "I like things that work," I told her. She smiled like that made sense. We ran into each other again at a hardware store. It was accidental, and also the kind of accidental that happens when two people remember a time and a place. We got coffee in daylight with nothing to hide. I didn't spill my history across the table. I didn't ask her to rescue me from anything. I listened when she talked. I looked like myself. Months passed with no drama. I fixed what was mine to fix and let the rest go. I cooked for one without it feeling like failure. My house got quieter in a way that wasn't empty. It was steady. On Saturdays, I did the farmer's market for real. I called my parents and didn't defend my choices because they didn't ask me to. Tyler brought his kid to help me build a planter box. The kid asked if he could use the drill, and I said yes and stood right there. Erin moved into a smaller place across town. I learned that from a mutual who mentioned she was renting a one-bedroom closer to work and complaining about prices. She tried 2 more times to push back into my orbit, once with a long message about missing our routines, once with a silent photo of our dog from 3 years ago who's been gone. I didn't block her. I didn't respond. I kept the boundary like a fence I didn't need to repaint because I'd said it right the first time. I see the whole story now without haze. We started normal, 2 people paying attention. Somewhere along the line, she stopped. She didn't slam a door. She slid it, clicked it shut quietly, and expected me not to notice as long as the cards swiped and the lights came on. The night she called our marriage a role, the mask fell for both of us. I stopped auditioning. People ask if I regret not fighting harder. The answer depends on what you mean by fight. I did what a man does when words lie. I changed the terms. I split the accounts. I walked out without slamming anything and put one clean sentence on a small piece of paper. "You won't have to play that role anymore." It wasn't about pride or teaching a lesson. It was about respect. Either it lives in the house with you or it doesn't. When it leaves, you don't chase it down the street. You lock the door, you keep your hands steady, and you start living like the person you said you were when you stood up and promised to be one. A month after the dust settled, Leah and I went to a small concert in the park. Not a date with scripts, just sitting on a blanket eating sandwiches and making fun of the guy who kept clapping on the wrong beat. On the way to the car, she asked, "You ever think about moving closer to the city?" "Maybe," I said. "The shop's doing well. I like my house. I like my blue door." "Keep the door," she said. "Move the rest if you want." I laughed. That's the right order. When she dropped me off later, I stood on my own porch, key in hand, and I felt something ordinary and valuable wait where it should be. In the morning, I drive my truck to work, fix what's in front of me, and come home to a place that doesn't require a performance. Some stories end with fire or a grand gesture. Mine ended with a clean cut and good paperwork. That's not romantic. It's adult. She lost the control she valued. I kept the dignity I value. She still writes sometimes. It's not my job to read. She keeps moving apartments. I keep adding shelves. That's the whole sermon. If you hear anything from it, hear this. You can love someone and still not let them manage your gravity. The second respect clocks out.